whether it's, law enforcement or military, and we have a plan for those careers. But the most important thing to realize is that these careers, we don't get to control tomorrow. And so I wanted to really stress the importance of start thinking today about what you're going to do tomorrow. You don't necessarily have to make huge leaps and bounds towards making steps towards that, but at least be thinking about it. Because one of the worst things that's going to happen is if your plan gets derailed and then you're in a position of, oh, now what am I going to do? So start thinking today for when tomorrow is, because tomorrow could literally be tomorrow. Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. Hello, everyone. I want to kind of change things up for this episode. Up till now, basically, you've been listening to guest talk, which is what it should be. But for this episode, it's just going to be me talking. What I want to talk about in this episode, though, is I want to give you a little bit more background on me, kind of where I came from. And I also want to tell you a little bit more about how this podcast came to be. So real simply for me, I'm an only child. I've got no brothers or sisters. My dad was born in Italy and came to the United States when my grandparents moved to Brooklyn when he was a teenager. My mom grew up in California. She grew up in the Bay Area. And after graduation from high school, she went east. Not chasing any dreams of acting or modeling or college. She just simply wanted away from the Bay Area. So in New York, my mom and dad met. They got married, had me. When I was about 4 years old, my mom decided that she wanted to be back in California closer to her family. So they moved. Shortly after that, they got divorced. And I've grown up here ever since. Growing up as a kid, I epitomized average. Played sports. I loved baseball, but I was never going to be a starting player for the Dodgers. Hell, my highlight reel was probably 7 seconds, and that includes a lead-in. So in school, I was the same way. I'd never applied myself. In my mind, school was just there. And my goal was simply to just get a passing grade. And spoiler alert, D's aren't considered passing. I recently learned, though, from my mom that in first grade, I was actually selected for the GATE program. But she told the school no, because in her opinion, she thought that I would feel like I was different if I was separated from from my other classmates. So I didn't go didn't go down that route. The only thing I really excelled at during school was talking in class. Not always to the teacher. But maybe that was foretelling that I was going to end up hosting this podcast, because one of the things that I enjoy the most is being able to have the conversations with the interesting guests I've had. In high school, I came to a crossroads. By this point in my life, I was wanting to play football. Freshman year, I injured my knee. Nothing significant, not surgery or anything like that. But we had a family friend who was a doctor, and their recommendation was that I shouldn't continue playing football because I could injure my knee worse. I think they were just kind of taking the doctor route. Let me give the safe answer. But ultimately, all my dad heard was stop playing. And so you combine that with not having good grades in school, and my dad made the decision, you aren't playing football. And so in my infinite wisdom, at that time, not that I'm much smarter now, I was going to show him. And so I stopped playing sports altogether. But even worse, if school was already a low priority on my list, it became the lowest priority on my list. To say the least, I became a complete screw up. This lasted all the way through my junior year of high school. But fortunately for me, all it generates today are stories of, wow, I didn't get arrested. I did come pretty close a couple times, but fortunately for me, I was able to keep myself on the a bit of a straight and narrow. College was never something that was going to be or was on my radar. My mom didn't go to college. My dad didn't go to college. So for me, the idea of getting good grades in school was never a priority until my senior year. My senior year, I got a new guidance counselor, and I was lucky that she did not sugarcoat things. She basically she told me that I needed to pull my head out of my ass, because if I kept going down the path that I was going, there were no opportunities for me after high school. And this helped. I straightened myself up, and I pulled A's and B's my senior year, oddly enough. It's funny what happens when you simply apply yourself. But the other thing at that point in my life was she also recommended, and I'm sure it was because of my poor grades, she also recommended that I consider a branch of the military. And I had not thought about the military to that point, but I started looking into it. And I went so far down the rabbit hole that I got all the way to signing the delayed enlistment papers. The problem was at that point, I was still 17, and so my dad was going to have to sign the delayed enlistment papers for me. And basically, he said no. He said, you want to go in the military, you make it your decision when you're 18, and you can sign yourself. So I'm in my senior year of high school. I've committed to it. And at that point, I've decided I want to go in the military. And so I started talking to everybody I could, or at least everybody that I came in contact with who had been in the military. And the reoccurring theme that I got was that if I wasn't going to make a career out of it, don't waste my time. I look back on it now, and I'm sure my lack of maturity didn't allow me to really kind of see through their bias from their negative experiences or just their experiences being in the military. But bottom line was, I didn't meet anybody or come in contact with anybody who was really pro going in the military. You're also talking the mid 80s. So it was a period where, you know, our soldiers weren't actively engaged in battle. It'd been quite a while. I mean, the Gulf War hadn't even occurred yet. So maybe that was a factor, but ultimately I moved away from that idea. The funny thing was that at that point in time in my life, I wanted to be a cop. And I knew I wanted to be a cop, but I knew that I couldn't be a cop because I would need to be 21 to be a police officer. And so I was looking at what I was going to do as that stopgap between graduating high school and being old enough to be a police officer. And I know for some of you right now, you're probably hearing that needle scratch across a record and you're saying to yourself, what is he saying? Because being a cop seems like a very logical progression from somebody who was a complete screw up, who didn't care about school and grades were the lowest of my priority. I didn't come from a law enforcement family. My dad served in the Army and was in Korea, but he worked for American Airlines my whole life growing up. I had no family members who were law enforcement. I had some, uncles and cousins who were firefighters on the East Coast, but law enforcement wasn't in my family. But I knew that that's what I wanted to do. If you would have asked me in my young teenage years, no matter how bad I was, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So out of high school, I actually got a job with a police department, and I was doing all of the civilian jobs. I was a cadet, I was a dispatcher, I was a jailer. But fortunately for me, the greater part of that department was my first catalyst to push me to continue going to school. And what I mean by that is I really wanted to be a police officer for that agency. And what they required was a 2-year degree at that time to be a police officer. So while I was working my civilian jobs, I went to junior college and got my AS degree. As a matter of fact, I graduated in January and started the academy in April. So catalyst number one, continuing on with my college education. 10 years later, the second catalyst to continue my education came about, and that was the birth of my 3 children. In my mind, their mom had a bachelor's degree. And so the way I looked at it was the best way I could emphasize the importance of education, because it was never emphasized to me, was leading by example. And so by that point in time, like I said, about 10 years into my law enforcement career, I was a detective. I knew I was going to have a set schedule, so I went back to school and got my bachelor's degree. But the crazy thing happened with that. During that period, that couple-year period of getting my bachelor's degree, all of a sudden, school and learning actually became fun. So completely contrary to anything I thought I would ever do academically from my high school years, I went on and got my master's degree. And you might be saying to yourself, oh, okay, well, then that's the end of his academic journey. No, I've actually been teaching at the college level now since 2011. So I would say that my academic journey has been quite long, but it's been interesting, and I've truly enjoyed it. So what's come from that for me, though, is I do stress the importance of education to my kids, but I tell them every day, education has to be for you. You have to want to get education. And as much as I encourage them to go to college, it's got to be something that they want to do. They can't think that their mom or myself want them to go to college, so that's what they have to do. So back to my law enforcement career. Basically, I've been in law enforcement for 34 years. I've been a cop for 30 of those years. I've had the opportunity to work with some great people and work some great assignments. I've been a field training officer. I've worked SWAT. I've been a detective. I was assigned to the FBI for a couple of years. Been part of a range staff, training people on shooting. And then the last few years, I've promoted up through the ranks of leadership. So I've had a very interesting career so far. On a personal note, or more personal note, I've got my been divorced medal. So yeah, I'm the cliche. Like I previously mentioned, I've got 3 children who I love to death, and it's interesting, or it's exciting for me to watch them grow up. I've remarried. What I will tell you is, speaking from my experience, when you finally get to know yourself, which is a key point in your life. For me, it happened in, I think, my mid-40s. Once I finally realized who I was is when I found that person that truly compliments me and is my best friend. And my wife today will, hopefully attest to the same thing. The funny thing with it is that in the promotional process, one of the things you'll hear all the time is know thyself. And until you really kind of take it to heart and really do that self-introspection, I truly don't believe success will come until you really know yourself. So that's just one of my little soapbox things. Obviously, as a parent, I've made my mistakes. My kids are a product of divorce. I was a product of divorce. I would like to be able to say that they would never have to experience that, but they did. And so I do the best I can every day. With getting to know myself more, I've also applied that same mentality to striving to try to be the best father I can each day. But, it's hard. And I'm sure they've experienced things that I wish I could have shielded them from, but I'm doing my best every day. So enough about me. And by this point, probably everybody's bored to death, so I probably should throw out something to make a loud bang or a loud noise, just to make sure everybody's awake. But let's get into the podcast. So the podcast came about through a project I've been working on at work. And in a nutshell, we've been bringing back the retirees from my current agency to, for no better term, to be a network source for our pending retirees to reach out for advice and guidance. So we've been having these, what we call lunchtime chats, and they basically are there to answer questions and provide their experience with their transition out of law enforcement. From these question answer sessions, I started getting people suggesting, hey, you should think about doing a podcast. And the idea didn't come off as foreign to me because I listen to podcasts and I like the idea. So I started doing the research and looking into getting this going. The first thing I had to do was define the focus. And it was very simple for me. It was the importance for planning today for our transition tomorrow. I knew I wanted to do long form conversation, And I knew that, you hear the comment, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And so all the podcasts that I listen to, I'm flattering the hell out of them because I stole a bunch of ideas from them. Coming up with the name, that was easy. The idea of transition drill comes from, for any of you who've spent a significant amount of time on the shooting range, you probably know immediately what this is. For those that don't, I'm going to give you a brief description. You have your primary platform. It's usually a rifle, and you have a secondary platform, usually your pistol. And so through thousands of repetitions of training this, you go from transitioning from your primary platform to your secondary platform. And so in a real world scenario, your rifle goes nothing. Something happens. It could be a jam. It could be a malfunction. It could simply be that the rifle's gone dry. You're not going to take the time to try to figure out what's going on right there. You're in a gunfight. You need to get rounds on your adversary or on your target. So you clear your rifle, you immediately transition to your handgun, and you continue putting rounds downrange. The whole point of this is through repetition, it becomes second nature. You do it without even thinking about it. It's just instinctual. And so I wanted to correlate that same mentality to this podcast. We have our platform, our current careers, whether it's law enforcement or military, and we have a plan for those careers. But the most important thing to realize is that these careers, we don't get to control tomorrow. And so I wanted to really stress the importance of start thinking today about what you're going to do tomorrow. You don't necessarily have to make huge leaps and bounds towards making steps towards that, but at least be thinking about it. Because one of the worst things that's going to happen is if your plan gets derailed, and then you're in a position of, oh, now what am I going to do? So start thinking today for when tomorrow is, because tomorrow could literally be tomorrow. I had to define my target audience. So obviously, the first responder community was very easy. I mean, that's what I've spent the last 34 years of my life in. But when I started doing the research, the thing that I realized was first responder community and the military community, they share a similar boat, so to speak, in that our jobs do a great job of recruiting us in, but when it's time to walk away, it's a little less than good, so to speak. Usually, many of us, it's, hey, there's the door, and it was nice knowing you. So immediately, it went from focusing on the first responder community to focusing on law enforcement or the first responder community and the military. The next thing I realized, and this was probably the biggest eye-opener for me when I was doing the research, was far too many from both of those careers actually don't make it to retirement. Most of them, or most of the ones who don't make it to retirement, it's due to probably a medical reason. And that's one of the inherent, call it a danger, call it a weakness, whatever you want to call it. It's one of the inherent effects of this job. You could go out tomorrow, get injured, injure a shoulder, injure a knee, injure a back. And it's not something that's going to debilitate your life, but it's going to make you unable to continue doing that job. So whether you're in the military or you're a first responder, it could be, hey, we really like you. We'd really like you to stay, but you are no longer functional in this environment anymore. So we're going to have to ask you to leave. The other thing is that there are other factors that come into play. Family gets into, you might have, if you're a military member, you might have been deployed multiple times, and all of a sudden now you've got a spouse and children who need you at home. And so as much as you would like to do a career, it's not going to happen. The worst scenario is we're all human. We make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes or those decisions cause our careers to come to an end. So there were a lot of factors that play into it, but I really started to realize, I just never thought about it before, that there's a great number that don't make it to quote unquote retirement or the end of their plan. So regardless of the reason why, I knew the thing that I wanted to present was the stories of the transition. I wanted to give that advice, that experience, those tidbits of information from those people who have made their transition, that from their firsthand account, they're going to be able to help those who are sitting in the current seat thinking about their transition. And that was at the core of it. That's what I wanted. I wanted to allow others to hear from people who have been in their shoes and gone through their transition and have or can give that advice. What I wanted to also stress, and I've hit on this a little bit also previously, is that planning is the most important thing. We have a plan for our career, whatever that plan is, but that plan may not come to fruition. And if you don't start thinking about what you're going to do afterwards, when you come to that transition, even if it is simply just retirement, you got to have an idea of what you're going to do afterwards. You've got to have that plan in place for what is going to be your next mission. What's going to cause you to want to get up in the morning? In conjunction with that, though, you could have a perfect plan in place. And we all have heard that saying of failing to plan is planning to fail. So you step forward from that and you have what you perceive as a perfect plan in place. But Mr. Murphy gets a say in that plan also. And that son of a bitch usually provides more problems than assets. So creating your plan and starting to work your plan now, even if you're a long way out from what you perceive as the end of your career, having that network in place, having those people in your life that can assist with that transition ensures that when tomorrow comes, you're as best prepared for it as possible. Besides planning for tomorrow, the other component, so there's two components that I really wanted to hit on for this podcast. The main point is the transition and preparing today for tomorrow's transition. But equally important to me was the importance of taking care of ourselves today. Do all that you can, or a good amount that you can, to take care of yourself both mentally and physically. The primary focus is the importance of mental health. We are all in professions that expose us to enormous amounts of trauma on the daily, and we see horrendous things. We're human beings. This has an impact on our mental health. And for so many years, there's always kind of been this stigma that if you reached out and asked for help or said that you needed help from a mental health component, you were considered weak or a failure. And that was something that I really wanted to stress is not true. We have a Rubik's Cube between our ears, and oftentimes it takes somebody professional to help us solve that puzzle. The other thing I wanted to stress was the importance of physical health and taking care of yourself. If for nothing more, get to the end of your plan, your goal, your retirement, whatever it is, and be the best physical person you can be so that you can at least go enjoy your retirement. Don't be that person who's so out of shape or, can't go enjoy life because of physical restrictions. You don't have to live your life in the gym. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want to make it sound like I'm turning this into, you got to be Mr. America or Mrs. America. What I'm saying though is just find something in your life that taxes your muscles on the daily basis, taxes your cardiovascular system on the daily basis, just a little bit each day. Side note though, I will probably say that if you're not somebody who's actively involved in training, if you do get involved in it, and even for those of us who do, and trust me, I'm no picture of physical fitness, but it will become addictive. And it is something that once you get there, it's hard to walk away from. So it's just a matter of getting to where it becomes something regular in your life. And especially for my first responder community, something I want you to think about is how much would you want your partners to train to to ensure that you go home safely to your family? Think about that for a second. How much would you want your partners to train so that you go home safely each day? Now, I want you to think about this. How much are you training to make sure they go home to their families each day? Just think about that for a moment. The other thing related to physical fitness is I would highly recommend doing some sort of combatives. Myself, I've recently started down my jiu-jitsu journey. I've been at it now for about 8 months. Yes, very late in my career. And like with anybody else who's done jiu-jitsu, you hear this often. I wish I would have started 10 years ago. I wish I started 15 years ago. I wish I would have started when I was, in diapers. You got to start at some point. And I've enjoyed it to this point. I definitely see myself continuing with it. But the important thing that I want to stress with this is we get the absolute basic level of training in combatives with our jobs. We need to challenge ourselves, though, when it comes to confrontation more than just the basics. Don't forget, it's our egos that will tell us, hey, I'll rise to that level of whatever event is going to occur. But in actuality, what ends up happening is we fall to the lowest level of our training. And so I want you to take from this is that challenge yourself in that controlled environment where when you fail, all it is a hand bump and a high five and let's get at it again, as opposed to a real world scenario where you find out that your deficiencies are now literally life and death. So again, just something that will put you in a better perspective of what a true confrontation will put you in based on your capabilities and your skill level. I will also be presenting guests. I'm also going to present guests who address mental health. This is, in my opinion, one of the things that we really need to move forward with. And I can't say this enough. You are not a DIY project. Trying to address your mental health trauma by yourself is not the right way to do it. Self-medicating and thinking that you can get through this, you're big and strong and you're tough and you can handle this on your own. You're looking for failure. And so you're going to hear from many of my guests who are some of the highest level former military or first responder communities. And they're all going to say the same thing, is that they needed help. So don't think of it if you ask, I need to talk to somebody. Don't think that means you're failing. Don't think that means you're weak. So now that you know about me, now that you know about how the podcast came about and kind of what the goal of the podcast is, I'm going to ask again, I need your help going forward. I need your input on this. I need your critiques, good or bad. I want to hear what you like or don't like about the podcast. I can't make changes until you tell me what you would like more of or what you would like less of. If you have guest ideas, send me a message. Let me know what professions you're interested in hearing about, and I'll try to track them down. I want to make this podcast as best as it can for you. And so getting the right guests in front of the microphone or in front of the camera is what's going to do it. You can send me a message. You can go to the website, transitiondrillpodcast.com. Send me a direct message. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Paul Pantani. I also have the Transition Drill podcast page on LinkedIn and Facebook. So there's a variety of ways that you can reach out to me. Please send me a message. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. And also, please keep getting the word out. If there's somebody that you know that would benefit from hearing the information that's presented, tell them about it. That's how this podcast is going to grow, is through your help in spreading the word. So wrapping it up, I want to thank my wife, my family, and my friends for giving me the encouragement and the support to get this podcast off the ground. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen, and for those who are sharing it with others and helping me grow this. And last, I want to thank my guests, both the ones who have already been on the episodes and those that are going to be on the episodes. The information that you're providing is needed, but also, more importantly, I'm enjoying the journey and meeting you and hearing your story. So thank you very much for that. To everybody, please be safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. And most importantly, listen for the next episode, because I promise you there'll be another voice besides mine. Thank you. I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.